Hello and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is I, KaneFan701, yours truly, and I am back again with another stream, which was going to be a random one, but an interesting thought came to my mind, and I haven't actually spoken about my other interests besides with trains and Star Wars and anime and all that kind of stuff. What apparently you may know I am a big Marvel and of course a DC fan, but what many of you guys don't even know is that I'm also a Capcom fan, which is basically a Japanese video game series, which is basically like Marvel and the DC video games and all that kind of stuff. And the same thing goes with Star Wars as well. Now, interestingly, when it comes to Capcom, the only thing I remember is basically was what I grew up with at the same time during the 90s was the Street Fighter series, which of course is the main character led by Ryu, who is the Japanese good guy hero who has become more the icon figurehead for the company of Capcom's video games. And where you have like Spider-Man has been mainly, I think, from a lot of people's perspectives, is the face of Marvel, and or whether it was Thor, the Hulk, or Captain America, or any of the Avengers, regarding who they wanted to be. And of course, you have Luke Skywalker, who's like the face of Star Wars, or at the time when we grew up with the original trilogy. But when it comes to this kind of stuff, I really can remember digging back into my somewhere around, I think it was in my mid childhood time when I think I was about like 5 or 6 years old. Around during that some period, I think I was really, really getting into which I didn't realize at the time was the Japanese video gaming, which of course was called Street Fighter, which has begun since has been around since the late 1980s or so, and it became an evolving franchise as time has gone by, and it still is to this very day. But for fans of my generation, it was a very intriguing and awesome thing when video games, like from the Sega Drive, from the PlayStation 1 to the Sega Saturn, or whatever it was called, the other games, like, all the other stuff that was going around during that time period. But basically, Street Fighter has been with me since I was growing up. I can't particularly remember when and where, but if I was to have a very, very good guess, I think it would be around, if my memory can go further back, I think it was just about when I was about 3 or 4 years old, or somewhere in that time period. I cannot remember too well. But what I do remember is that I became hooked on Street Fighter 2, which was the Championship Edition, where they had this villain who, in my opinion, is the greatest villain of all time in Capcom, and arguably, in my opinion, the most powerfulest, is the Shadaloo Dictator, or in this case, in English, the Shadow Lord Dictator himself, M. Bison, who you can see on my icon. He's standing right next to my all-time favorite villain of the X-Men series, and Marvel, of course, being Magneto. Now, you're probably wondering what is with the icon you're seeing here, and what is this all talking about? Well, because, I am a big fan of Marvel and Capcom, and I've been that way ever since, but as time has gone by, I've kind of dabbled in and out of it. But when I look back on now, I really was so lucky to have the childhood that I had. And here, as you can tell, we've got my two favorite villains here, which are posing in their victory pose over the fallen so-called heroes of Ryu and Cyclops, which is from the video game X-Men vs. Street Fighter, which came out in the mid-90s in 1996, which was the beginning of the very first ever crossover gaming, which involved Marvel versus Capcom, which at the time I can remember was very revolutionary. And I have to let you guys know, for those of you who may or may not know, at the time during the 90s, the X-Men and the Street Fighter thing was kind of my big thing, when Marvel and Capcom were absolutely just tearing the house down on both sides of the world. And, we all had their separate fans. I, for one, was a fan of both. Now, for any of you guys who would like to join in and become a part of this, for those of you who are Marvel or, X-Men or Street Fighter fans or video game fans, whatever you like, I'd like to include some of you on this. I think this would be quite an intriguing topic. I've always wanted to talk about this, and we're going to go into a little bit of a cool laugh about this, and I'm going to try and remember and dig up the plot storylines of what went down. during this time period, and of course, it does mainly focus on my interest on my favorite villains, which are Magneto and Bison. Now, I'm just going to put the link in here for any of you guys who want to come in. You are more than welcome to. This will take on not take too long. We just need to see who else can be free to join. Huh. Oh, Thomas R Studio. It's been a long while. Okay, let's see who else can join in. We need to get some more people in. Now, as you can tell, I've always been a fan of the X-Men, and this is going to go in some chronological order here. I've been a big fan of the X-Men basically when the animated series came out, and even though I loved the live-action series that had Hugh Jackman in it, the animated series will always be my personal variation of them. Yeah, like I said, it was really, really cool. And of course, I will have to say it was a fantastic thing. And like I said, the X Men were really, really good. But it was around that same time that I can remember the video games of Street Fighter was really, really cool. But then I remember at one point when I went down to this, this pub, which was known as the Austin Club, down the road from where I'm at. They used to have this old room when the pub was a bit crowded and small, and they had like this arcade video game in the far corner, and that was when I discovered the X-Men versus Street Fighter series, and will never forget. I never forgot the first time I ever played. I think that was the first time I ever played in an arcade game. I think it was, but to have two of my favorites clashing, and of course seeing Magneto and Bison on there was absolutely fantastic. Because just remember, growing up, I was a big, big villain fan growing up at the time. When back in the day when villains were just excitable to watch and enjoyable to be, even if they get their asses kicked and if they lose or die, they always had the best, send off and the greatest themes and everything else. And it was fantastic, mate. Oh, hey there, Mark. Nice to see you.
Yep.
Just putting this is basically not Thomas related. This is basically to do with Marvel and Capcom, the Street Fighter versus X-Men video game thing, and this is really, really fantastic. Like a lot of cool stuff. Oh, hey Thomas Tank, nice to see you.
Hello there. Listening, talking about Marvel stuff. I'm interested.
I didn't know who it was at first, and I keep thinking, is it Thomas? Is that other? Because it was like another YouTube user. I keep mistaking you, dude.
It's just I change my profile picture now and then. It's gonna be hard to recognize me now.
The voice helps, but the icon, I'm like, oh
Yeah.
shit. I almost thought for a second, is it somebody who is a season 25 fan? That's a hell no in this thing. But
yeah.
Yeah, I'm just playing around, dude. Yeah.
I see.
It's basically, as you can tell by my icon, which is what I made a long time ago, this is actually to do with, it looks like Billy Shupacker decided to share his screen for some bizarre reason. I don't know what he's doing that for, but basically the guy's known as Rebuild Patriot Productions. That's his real name. Oh, geez, I didn't realize that. But in any cases, though, how I think, like I said before, when it comes to the whole thing regarding, Marvel and Capcom, which is what Street Fighter is owned, let's just say that, I've been a big fan of them since the mid '90s, and of course, X-Men was the first thing. They didn't come along too long after I discovered like Batman and Superman during the '90s when DC came into my life, and then Marvel came in
Oh,
just ironically nearly the same time, if not later on, because Spider-Man and the X-Men simultaneously got me into that sort of thing. But as I said before, during this time
oh,
period,
hold on.
yeah, I mean, during this time period, I was really digging the series. But when I saw the X-Men versus Street Fighter video game, the crossover game, which was the very first one, I literally thought this was like a spin-off series they were going to do. And I remember playing the arcade game for hours down the pub with my brothers and my father, because I always played as the bad guy, except for my favorite heroes, which were in the X-Men, which
Oh,
were basically Cyclops, Gambit, and Wolverine. They're my
interesting.
those are my X-Men trio in heroes to this very day still. But when it
Guess
came
I do
to
want. Oh wait.
Street Fighter, I didn't really have a hero. Like I didn't really like Ryu or Ken Masters or all that kind of stuff. But I did like Guile, the American Bart Simpson dude who's got like, that weird hair that he has. The Master of the Sonic Boom. He was probably the
Mm-hmm.
only hero I liked because he looked pretty cool. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Many cases, when it came to my favorite villains, I always played as the bad guys because I grew up in that era when bad guys were cool to watch. Even if you hated them, they always had the greatest deaths, the greatest send offs, and you could tell Magneto and M Bison in my icon. They still rank to this day as my two top faves. Um, like I said, when I remember playing as these two, because in the arcade game you could actually play either single playered or you can do a tag team.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was like this was back then. Back then in the mid '90s, the X-Men versus Street Fighter game was revolutionary. It was the first time you could actually do a crossover tag team with who you want to partner up with. But at the end of the in the storylining, you have a partner with you and you fight all the way up until you fight the main villain, which is Apocalypse in the X-Men. He's the bad guy in X-Men v Street Fighter. And once you beat that, whoever you beat, either yourself or your partner or whoever it is you play as has to force to turn on the other, and you fight your partner at the end, and then you win the arcade game in like Team Arcade. And it's a really good, really clever thing. I mean, the same thing didn't have to happen in singles because when it came out on PlayStation, that was the problem because of the space that they had to do. So they had to do it in single-handedly. But I remember playing it on another arcade, which was like a £3 arcade game, which was down at an autism club I used to go to, and it was in there instantly, and I was literally brought back to my childhood. And I can remember the
Huh.
theme songs, mostly M Bison's, because it was just basically a remix of his Street Fighter 2 theme. And of course, Magneto was there, and of course, I soon discovered that the Marvel superhero video game, which came out before this game ever had. And of course, there was the X-Men Children of the Atom game, I think it was, which led to the
Mm-hmm.
idea of creating X-Men v Street Fighter. But like I said before, guys, like this was an absolutely thrilling video game, and of course, in the storylining, you know, they all have their own agendas of how they cross over universe into each other, and because back nowadays it's kind of awesome, but back then this was like really, really never seen before from what I can remember. And in the storyline when with Magneto, I mean, I'm going to try and talk about both of them as separate as I can, but I'm literally like thrown back in amazement how long I've wanted to do this. So I'm kind of geeking out a little bit. But anyways, since you like Marvel 2 as well, Thomas Tang, well, I'll let you have your talk as well. But
All right. Thank you.
like I said, I mean,
So
so, so I'm going to ask
on the
you a question
mention.
first.
Hmm? All right.
When did you become a big fan of Marvel, or in this case, and who was your favorite hero and your villain? And of course,
Mm,
like
huh.
what did you think when you saw like this with the X-Men against Street Fighter, the video game ish, and of course, what do you think of M Bison, who's basically almost like the Magneto version of Street Fighter in a strange way?
All right, I'll get to my take on what I enjoy when it comes to Marvel stuff. So basically, to me, the Batman stuff is just awesome. Spider-Man
Like,
2,
the
because I have a
Batman was
friend who's
released
into Spider-Man
just to
stuff.
correct you. Yeah.
Yeah, but this is related to Marvel in a way, but it's pretty much mixed. We know the stream's
I
not really Tom. Yeah, the stream's not Thomas related, but for some reason on Christmas I got like a poorly done Batman James custom.
oh Jesus.
Like it was like custom Trackmasters. That YouTube channel who does like pretty amazing customs that the company never thought on doing. Basically, he solo handedly does pretty awesome Trackmaster stuff. But we're on top of Marvel, and he one point did like a Batman Thomas Trackmaster custom. I was like, oh my goodness, that actually looks cool.
Hang on
And
a minute.
I
Hang on a minute. I'm getting a flashback here. I remember this. But we're going off topic again, but this is what happens. But
hmm
I remember there was this like Thomas and Batman remix thing I saw once, and
oh
this
yeah,
guy
from the official
like
channel.
yeah, there was like on a channel this dude or whoever it was, I can't remember his name, but it was hilarious where Thomas goes on the turntable and he spins around like a spinning top and he becomes Batman on wheels, and Percy gets the most hilarious transformation. Like he gets on the turntable and he becomes Robin and he spins around, but he shrinks down to size, and I don't know what the hell. I know. I'm like, what the hell is going on? And then they go around, they see the Joker and the Penguin and Batman
I
and Robin, but like,
budget.
okay, they were basically like, tied up and they had to go and rescue the actual Cape Crusaders. And I
Yes.
remember, I don't know if it's still there, but I remember watching it and I literally couldn't stop laughing.
Oh yeah, that. Right back on the okay. So basically, I know I still have that custom with me because it's in my Trackmaster bin somewhere, but it's basically it was like Thomas pretty cool labeling, but what I got was James marked up and everything, like painted up, like the Batman initial on his body and on the tender, and Thomas's number. I was like, what? And
Okay. I mean,
and what
if you
was
haven't
weird?
if you haven't seen my take on Thomas, I advise you to check it out on my DA. You can actually, well, I kind of lost topic on it because of my real life issues, but I had planned to do like a Thomas and Batman fanfic series, which was
Oh
quite.
yeah.
If you haven't seen it, it is quite funny. It's like a mashup of Tim Burton's Batman and Thomas and the Magic Railroad because it's set in the year 2000, and it's not.
Oh. Okay.
And of course the topic quality is like Victor Tanzik style, and because I've got Joey and Mickey in there. Railgate is mentioned, but the
Mm-hmm.
thing is though, Joey's playing like the role of Ed Card from Tim Burton's Batman,
Oh
and
yeah.
yeah, like he's like a corrupted, well, sort of like a, oh boy, he's not a good engine anymore, and
Mm-hmm.
and of course Mickey's not, and Mickey's playing the role of, for funny reasons, he's playing journalist Knox from Tim Burton's Batman.
Oh yeah.
So I changed him from being Sodor's rescue engine to Sodor's media engine.
Interesting.
Just
But when
for
it
it was
comes
a
to
bit of a laugh, just for a comedy
yeah,
laughter.
and when it
You know.
comes to what I got specifically, I'm trying to remember now fully, but the custom pretty much you know, the buffering, the beam was black, body was completely black too. And there was like a Batman symbol on now I'm gonna have to turn my camera and use my iPad James for example. So basically the Batman symbol was on here, and then number one was here, and the Batman symbol on there too.
Oh,
I don't
cool.
know. I don't know why, but that's what it looked like. Even there
Well,
was a handmade drawn mask too, which I was like, cool.
in my version, I mean, I spoiler alerting here.
Yes.
We'll get back to Magneto and then Bison on Street Fighter. We just got to clear this one up here a little bit. Um,
Yeah.
if you were to see like Batman and Thomas, together, there are times where they have been. Like,
hmm
I know, spoiler alert, guys. I'm just telling anyway because to hell with it. They do sometimes be seen together because Thomas is the only engine Batman, I mean, can trust and he befriends, and as do the others. But he's always on him a lot because of the respect and friendship they have. Let's just say, in a way, the Engine and Sodor actually know who he is under the mask. When they all know he's Bruce Wayne because he tells
Mm-hmm.
them because he took his
Yes.
cape off, his mask off once, and you know, and they all vow, even they all vow to never tell his identity to the public. They don't even like nobody on Sodor knows who he is. Like not even the Fat Controller doesn't even know who he is either.
Oh.
Like they
So
don't even tell the engines know who he is, but the public and the controller do not know who he is.
so basically they're like so basically Thomas is here like, hey buddy, let's not tell Sir Tom Hat. It's a
Now,
secret.
basically, Batman tells him as a promise in my Batman Thomas and Batman story in the year
Yeah.
2000. He basically tells, like, he explains everything about his actual family, the past and everything. He's trying to earn the respect, and trust with these engines, despite it's a bit bizarre. But this is kind of like what he's trying to do because he left Gotham City because it's changed. It's not the home he knew anymore after he killed all the villains, whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
and you know,
Yes.
Commissioner Gordon and Robin and Alfred, they've all been deceased. So in this universe, Batman leaves Gotham City to go start a new life where his vigilante actions can be accepted. You know what I mean?
Oh
Like,
yes.
say, if the Sodor police cops, like Constable Chap and the other members of the Sodor, officer teams
Mm-hmm.
can't do anything about it, he can do something with it.
Ah yes.
And, where his vigilante actions are accepted. Like,
Mm-hmm.
basically he can take matters into his own hands. Kind of like what we saw with Ben Affleck's Batman, where we'll get into that later on. But
Yeah.
anyways, besides that, they form a good alliance together. And of course, if you want to know where Batman lives on Sodor, if you were wondering where he is, he basically in this universe he's living on Thomas's branch line. He's actually living in the quote unquote retired, closed down Troy Wreck mine, where Thomas
Mm-hmm.
fell.
Yeah,
He
that's
basically that's basically where he is, where he's out of the public view, where he can be alone. He builds a small mansion. He basically takes everything he had from Wayne Manor and he builds a new Wayne Manor on top. And the entire mine that's not even used, he transforms that into his Batcave.
that is actually pretty nice.
Yeah, basically that's where he goes. Only Thomas is allowed entrance to get there because, after trusting in friendshipness, in a strange way, Batman will allow Thomas to go into the Batcave with him, so he knows where it is, and even his
Hmm.
crew will know. Even pardon my French, but in Shed 17 cast,
Mm-hmm.
what's his name? Uh,
Keith Wickham.
no, not Chief Wiggum. We're not talking about The Simpsons here.
I was talking about like the one character in that in Shed 17, Keith
I'm
Wickham.
just trying to remember. Yeah, I'm just trying. Oh yeah, Keith. Yeah,
Keith. Oh yeah, Keith Hartley. Yeah, there we go.
that's it. Keith Hartley. Yes. Yeah, he's also exclusive in the series. He's basically known as Thomas's best driver.
Oh.
Yeah, and he's also involved in the story saga as well. So he too knows who Batman is. Again, I'm putting all the best guys I know of, but the crews know as well, but they never tell anybody else.
Yes.
Staff know, but except for the rule and everybody else. But anyways, let's just say in a cool way, in a very awesome way.
Mm-hmm.
They form this friendship and whatnot and everything. But if they were to work together, Thomas actually gets his design based and copied and built. Because Batman decides, he can't always use his Batmobile, so he's starting to build a Batmobile on wheels that can run on rails. So,
Oh. Okay.
so basically, I know this is going to sound wacky. So basically, he builds a clone variation of Thomas's own shape, and he basically paints it all black. And then basically he puts the Batman logo on the side tanks, and even though he can't shovel a steam or do what all it'll do, so instead he does it like he's driving his Batmobile instead, except he's doing it on the car thing, except he can drive it in a cab. But it's like
Oh
driving.
yeah.
But it's
Basically,
basically
car-infused controls.
yeah, basically it's like driving a car wheeling on his train thing. And what's funny about this It's basically called the Bat Train, as he likes to call it. Uh,
Oh,
yeah, and he takes like a couple of rolling stock with him. Like he could take like a coach where he can take his training room where he could change around, or keeping his back gear and everything else. But he also has like a couple of vans and trucks and even a caboose, a brake van, where he could
yeah.
basically put like the bad guys in the back. Like he doesn't need a guard or whatever. It's all done by control manually, and he could he can throw the bad guys in the back. And
Oh
there's
yeah.
one of the vans that we see for the mail train or the flying kipper. He uses that as his computer technology room, where he like on wheels, like he can go out and like join forces with the officers, or like when they set up like a control base room or wherever they are, regardless, like you see in the
Mm-hmm.
SWAT. That's what he can do, where all of his
Interesting.
computer gadgets all live in.
All right. So getting back on topic of what I was saying about like the Thomas and Marvel stuff now, because I
Okay,
have like a
we kind of got off topic, ladies and gentlemen, but this is what happens with me and Thomas Tank. But this is just all for fun. But anyways,
yeah.
guys, back on a serious topic there. When it comes to Marvel and X-Men, I've been a big fan of Magneto ever since the X-Men series that came out in animation. I mean, even when we saw the live action series uh, with Ian McKellen, who basically plays the older Magneto. And of course, you had Michael Fassbender, who plays the younger Magneto, which we saw in X Men First Class and Days of Future Past. You know, I've I really did like Magneto. I mean, to this very day, he's still one of the best. I mean, sometimes you can even see him as an anti-hero as opposed to a villain,
Hmm.
or even as a good guy, because there have been times where he does tend to like shift from side to side or be stuck in the middle because because of his past of how he was. But at the same time, if you want to look at somebody who's very equal and almost kind of like very similar to Magneto, if not completely as he is my favorite Street Fighter character, which is of course Bison, who is basically the leader of a crime organization known as Shadaloo, or in the English dub, it's known as Shadaloo. But putting these
Hmm.
two together was like an unknown dream come true, which you can see in my icon. They basically, in the X Men versus Street Fighter series, they formed this like alliance together, and they're basically in secretive to each other. And at the end of the day, they both have the same goal of wanting to have world domination. Now, in X Men v Street Fighter, they are secretive to one another, but they pose as a serious threat to the heroes of the X Men and, of course, to the Street Fighter series as well. Which is, of
Hmm.
course, where you can see here you have like Cyclops, and Ryu together, who are basically the two main heroes of the video game. And they do, again, have very similarities in terms of their powers. Like, with Ryu, he has that Hadouken type of power, which he shoots from his hands. And of course, you have Cyclops, who uses his optic blast from his eyes. Um, but in the
Interesting.
Marvel, yeah, but in the Marvel versus Street Fighter video game, in the Marvel universe, their powers can be super succeeded in terms of the Capcom characters. They can do more than they could in the actual universe that they came from. Like with M. Bison, he could fly around in the air, he could hover more often, he could be super agility, he could use his special maneuvers while in the air. And of course, you had Ryu, for example, when he does his Hadouken special maneuver, it comes like in a series of massive waves, like a big massive laser screen, very similar to what happened when Cyclops shoots his, optic blast from his visor at full power, which is
Hmm.
again one of those amazing things from that this game could do. Like they made the Capcom characters look super badass. Like they could do more than they could in their original universe. And for those of you who are not familiar with Magneto and Bison, Magneto, who you can see in the purple and red, he's been around ever since the 1960s, ever since X-Men issue #1 came out in 1963, which was ironically enough the same year Steam was doing away with diesels, and of course, Flying Scotsman was saved in that year by Alan Pegler, interesting enough. But this was near the end of 1963 when the X-Men first were introduced. And of course, you know, Magneto back then was a far, far cry from what we recognize him as now. Where, you know, Eric Lancher or Magnus, whatever you want to call him, which is his other name, when he's not in Magneto, he's a far cry from the criminal Nazi thing that he is, because Magneto in the X-Men is, in fact, his birth origin was, in fact, in Germany. And of course, his past is revealed that he is actually a Holocaust survivor.
Hmm.
Yeah, he has a very darkened, very, very darkened past after what he endured, in his life growing up, having his parents taken away, in the concentration camps, during the era of the Third Reich. And he's actually a survivor. He had a good reason to be as he was, where, why he does the things that he does. But yeah, when mutants at the time in the X-Men were becoming more known, and of course he wanted to take over the world to wipe out ordinary humans and show that mutant superiority is going to, reign supreme and make way for a new generation of for mankind and whatnot. Basically trying to eliminate the human race is what he was trying to do. So
Hmm.
in the first X-Men issue, if you want to check it out, Thomas Tank, I advise you to check it out, because it's, just keep in mind, it's not like what you see in the animated series, because in the comic book, it's actually kind of funny, because this was back during the silver age of comic booking.
Glenn, just my phone has given me a little bit of a pop saying my phone is overheating. I'm gonna have to get going and let it cool down.
Oh dear.
Yeah, I don't
I'll
know
try
why it's doing this, but it's gonna automatically shut down. So have a great day, Glenn.
That's all right, mate. Come back whenever you need to. So it just so happened that with Magneto, his character was well fleshed out as the years progressed. But I didn't know any of this until I looked up upon him, until later on when I was a teenager. But basically, in X-Men issue number 1 in 1963, Magneto becomes as the first evil mutant in the X-Men franchise. And one thing about him that was very similar to what we saw in the series is that his horns on his helmet were more pronounced and more sharpened. And of course, his cape was also really short. Whereas almost like I'm very used to it now, where it's like almost got this like Batman cape flowing around it. But yeah, but the rest of him though is pretty much the same. But basically, like many villains, he was like basically a mustache to twirl at this point. And in the comic book, he breaks into Cape Citadel and he's planning to launch, nuke missiles to kill the humans. And when the X-Men show up, they stop him and he gets away, and of course later on he would return, and over time Magneto would be fleshed out and we would see his reasons and motivations of being the badass villain that he is. Now, of course, when it comes to his other counterpart in Street Fighter, which of course is very, very different, that's been around since the late 80s. But the ultimate villain of this being M. Bison, he's been around, ironically enough, the same as I have. He's been around for 31 years since he was introduced in 1991 when Street Fighter 2 came out, which was called the World Warrior video game. And Bison was introduced as this mysterious villain who had a criminal organization known as Shadaloo, and he was the master of the Big Four. He basically was orchestrating a tournament to capture Ryu, who was basically Japan's strongest fighter. And basically, he wields a power which is known as psycho power, which is a bit weird, but that's the power that M. Bison possessed. And of course, we would find out more about this when we get into the Street Fighter Alpha series, which happened in the mid 90s. But in the beginning, we didn't know anything about who he was. He was just this mystique, weird, badass character who could literally kick anybody's ass. Like, he was literally a badass that you didn't want to screw with. But basically, afterwards, when we found out who he was, I really digged the character. He had a badass theme song, like you could fight for survival whenever you fought him in the final boss round in the game of Street Fighter 2. But, after that, the franchise was growing, and by the time we reached 1996, X-Men, the animated series, had taken up by storm, and X-Men was doing good with the Street Fighter Alpha series. They were, uncovering a lot of the earlier, younger years of the characters, and including M. Bison himself, when we revealed who he was in his original form, when he was a lot more powerful. And basically, in 1996, Marvel and Capcom came together, and they came with this plan idea of doing what's called the Marvel versus Capcom's franchise series, which lasted well into the 2000s, and it's still going on to this very day. Still, it had left an amazing impact on fans like myself. But basically, in X-Men versus Street Fighter, the Marvel universe are introduced to the Street Fighter characters, and they all get compiled into the Marvel universe, where their powers far supersede where they are, and they can do more things than they could ever do. And this, to me, was a fantastic storylining, and I still recommend anybody who's a big X-Men fan and a Street Fighter fan, I advise you to get this game on the PlayStation 1, or if you try and find an arcade game, which would be very difficult, you can actually try and find it, or basically just watch it on YouTube and type in X-Men versus Street Fighter. You'll have a hell of a blast watching the gameplay through as it progresses. Again, basically with Magneto and Bison, they're basically the semi-villains of the storylining, and they both want to achieve world domination, and they do seem to have an alliance. But the fact is, one of them is going to turn on the other. But basically, Bison, saw Magneto as a very similar equal to himself, and he felt like he could be perfect to work alongside with, and almost instantly they could actually get on superbly well. Like, putting two of my favorite villains together was just unheard of. Like, I couldn't recall anything like that happening. Like, two favorite similar universes, and it was just superbly done. But basically, playing as Bison and Magneto, they literally just smash their way through anybody that they can encounter. And of course, when they reach Apocalypse, because he's the bad guy in the game, they eventually turn on each other. And depending on who you play at the end, sorry, Robert Johnson, do not keep leapfrogging over, because that's really getting on my nerves. But basically, Magneto and M. Bison turn on each other, and they start battling each other to the death, or basically near into submission. And depending who you play as, whoever wins on top is the victor of that, and they begin their quest of dominating. Whereas in Magneto's case, he gets the upper hand and beats he beats Bison, and he takes his three servants, which are Vega, Balrog, and Sagat, and he becomes the leader of the new Grandmaster Force, and using his mutant superior technology to take over the world. But if you win as M. Bison and you defeat the Master of Magnetism, which is of course Magneto, basically Bison's power overwhelms him, and he takes over the world, and he then eventually sets his sights on taking over the universe. And that's basically Bison's ending storyline in X-Men vs. Street Fighter. But as we progress in the Marvel vs. Capcom universe and crossover, they've gone their separate ways. Bison eventually hooks up with another villain called Omega Red, and he takes some of Apocalypse's technology to use for his quest of further dominating. Magneto doesn't actually return until roughly 2000, when Marvel vs. Capcom decides to do a sequel way later on, which was a sequel called Marvel vs. Capcom 2: The New Age of All Heroes. And basically, Magneto and M. Bison and Cyclops, Wolverine, Gambit, Ken and Ryu, Guile and Cammy, Chun-Li, all the other Marvel vs. Capcom heroes and villains come together to stop Abyss because he's basically threatening to destroy all their universes, and if they cannot beat him, they can't go back to their original homes, you know. And from what I could remember, there was going to be a series which did come out, which was called Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Magneto made a return, but Bison did not return, and a lot of guys were kind of anticipating the two villains to kind of reignite their rivalry. But that never happened. And it was a crying shame for a lot of us. And either ways, but it would have been quite awesome had Bison and Magneto crossed paths with each other and either reformed their alliance or they could have continued on fighting with each other regardless. And one thing I found intriguing about this whole thing regarding the X-Men versus Street Fighter was because of it was a shame that we never got to see this turn into an animated crossover series, which of course would have been borrowed with the X-Men and crossover with Capcom. They could still do that in this day and age with the technology that we have now, if they ever wanted to, that is, which would be bloody amazing. Because I said for years that would be something that we fans would love to have seen. Like, there was an opportunity that was hit and missed. And, basically at the end, I mean, they could have even done like some sort of like a special limited crossover comic book as well of the X-Men versus Street Fighter, where it could be based on the video game, but instead of Apocalypse being the villain, you could have had like Magneto and M Bison, like have their story arc told, like how did they get together, like how did they end up forming this superb alliance, and how they literally would dominate, and it would have made a fantastic crossover series. And basically, it would have been something that would have revolutionized, you know, the Marvel universe as well as Capcom, because back in the 90s and into the early 2000s, Street Fighter and X-Men were literally like butting heads and dominating so well. I mean, you would think, right, that the relationship between the two companies would have flowered and blossomed into something really superb. But, I have to tell you, I mean, for those of you who may have remembered growing up with that, it was literally like a dream come true, like an unexpectedly crossover dream that would have been absolutely fantastic. Because I can remember there was a lot of talks about this game, and when it came out in the arcade, it was like a really, really successful thing to play on, and I could never imagine since or after, of just seeing two iconic, universes clashing as one. And, you had your favorites, or those you liked or didn't like, and you could form teams with them. So this was definitely revolutionary. Like, this set the bar for a lot of awesome things, you know. But basically, like I said, I can remember playing on the PlayStation 1 games, which you had, Marvel, which was doing a hell of a good job, and then Street Fighter also had its own fair share of the video game market. But having these two together was just, very, very awesome. And I can actually remember at one time when they were doing merchandising, they even took limited action figures. Like, they had Magneto taking on Cyclops, which was a very awesome package. And then you had, like, Wolverine, taking on Akuma, which was um, absolutely fantastic, and you had who else? You had Storm and I think it was Rogue and Chun-Li, or you had Gambit taking on somebody else. Like, basically, that's the whole awesome thing about it. Oh yeah, you even had Magneto taking on Ryu. This was like the perfect crossover of your best heroes and your villains just clashing it out. And it's something that I can never put my head around. Like, it was something that to this day would be like an absolute kick-ass movie. Uh, Sorry, lads, I'm just making sure if anybody else wants to pop in, they're more than welcome to. But basically, like I said, I really felt that like having M Bison and Magneto together was, to me, I feel like was a great thing to do. I mean, it's almost like when you put my favorite character of Darth Vader with Bison, because that's who I've had him team up with for a long while. Because Magneto kind of was in the background, but when I put those three together, that's like an ultimate trio alliance. And but if anybody who would like to take their own thoughts about this, you're more than happy to. And what do you remember of the game X Men versus Street Fighter, or what do you remember of Magneto and M Bison of the game and everything? But again, if you are more than welcome to, if you like to, and if you haven't got the time, I respect that. But still, this was something I really wanted to get out for a long time. And honestly, to this very day, I still can't remember like I'm not so sure like how this would have worked out, because crossover video games back in the 90s was again revolutionary, and I don't actually remember if it was ever popular. Like in today's time, crossovering is just one of the things that creativity can bring. But when I look back in the 90s when I was growing up, it was like unheard of. Like this had never been done before. Now, on paper, this would have been like definitely cool, but to actually do it, it was just, you know, something that we had never seen before. And, you know, if anybody remembers playing the game of X Men versus Street Fighter, it was, an amazing thing to do. Again, X Men versus Street Fighter was like a crossover game, a video game that was developed. It was the third game that featured Marvel comic characters, which followed on X Men: The Children of the Atom, and of course Marvel superheroes, which is I remember playing on during the time when Marvel and X Men were literally just dominating. Um, the franchise game of X Men was also included in this one. You know, originally it was actually a release as a coin operated arcade game, but later on in 1997 and in 1998 it was ported into the Sega Saturn and into the PlayStation, um, and of course incorporated a dual character selection and a team based combat. And of course, you know the sequel for this was Marvel Superheroes versus Street Fighter, and that was released in 97. And of course, M. Bison's been involved in that one too, but he formed an alliance with somebody else. And let's see, basically, like I said, I remember playing this one time, and I remember playing with one of my brothers, and I literally can remember getting my rear end kicked by this. Like, it was just so cool. Like, I didn't even know how to do finishing maneuvers, because I was terrible at playing on arcade games. But it was just so hilarious, playing as M. Bison and Magneto. But every time I played against Cyclops and Ryu, or anybody else, I literally was just like blasted in within a matter of seconds. But there were actually times where I could play single or tag team, but every time I went up against my dad on the video game archive on Street Fighter versus X Men, I always kept beating him because he was even worse than I was. And it was so funny. And I remember playing with my cousins on the video game, and we would just trade back and forth like who could win until we would run out of coins or spare change. Like that was just just so funny back then. Um, from what I can also remember, the X Men versus Street Fighter was so successful with fans like myself. Like when it was released, it had generally positively good views, and the critics praised it for the gameplay and the springs animation quality was just like beyond what we thought it was going to be. The Sega Saturn port version received a lot of praises for maintaining the experience of the original arcade, but when it comes to the PlayStation 1 port version of the video game, X-Men v Street Fighter was met with mixed to negative critical reception, with so many several features being removed, such as the tag team battles. So you basically had to play single-handedly, which was normal for me because I wasn't even used to playing in tag team battles at the time. So this was definitely, again, revolutionary and a new thing for me. Um, but the reason why the PlayStation 2 of the game was different because the changes were done in response to the technical limitations of the PlayStation, which is understandable. But again, I remember playing it once, and I don't even recall having any issue with it at all because back then, whenever you wanted to play a game for a limited amount of hours, it was just you know fantastically done, and you would never get bored in playing on it. Um, Another thing, like I said before, like what they did was, to make the game intriguing. They even did they made some reimaginable image style with the Street Fighter characters because they were done with re-imaged and high exaggerated versions of their special moves. Like, for example, like when Cyclops shoots his optic stuff from his eyes, like it becomes like a super optic blast maneuver that takes the whole screen up. And they did this with Ryu, who does like the infamous Hadouken fireball shot from his hands. And what they did with that, for example, to make it similar to Cyclops' optic blast effect, they equipped it as a super Hadouken, which filled the entire screen up. And to me, I felt that that was just fantastic. Like that creativity of making them even more looking like a badass. Like they could have done that with M. Bison, for example, when he has his Psycho Crusher maneuver. They could have done like that, where he does like his Super Psycho Crusher that fills the entire screen up, But instead, they made it like where he could just do it normal, and he could fly through the air, and he could do all kinds of stuff. But again, it was one of the examples that they did in the game, and they just made the Capcom guys absolutely fantastic. And judging by what I'm seeing here now, a couple of years ago, it was announced that the X-Men vs. Street Fighter would be included in a home arcade canopy for the arcade one-up alongside with the other games. So that was definitely that's something very, very intriguing to see, and I actually like that. That is actually something we have never had before. Um, so it's basically an arcade one-up is basically a computer hardware production thing, and this is really awesome. And if they actually can do this, I would love to see that happen because I'd love to try and play that no matter what it is, because that is something tremendously awesome. I basically remember playing on some time ago. I think the last time I played X-Men v Street Fighter was not too long after it was released, but I do remember a long time ago. I think this was around. Where was it now? Let me think here. I think it was around the time when I was a teenager in high school. This was roughly about 2005, or was it 2006? I don't know, or 2007, or somewhere in that time period. I remember. I just remember. Looking up about M. Bison, and I remember listening to his theme songs. And then I came across this video which had his X-Men v Street Fighter theme, and I was instantly brought back to my childhood. This was like the first time in 12 years at the time that I ever remembered the game or even his theme song, and I instantly became a fan of crossover video games again because of that. And then many years later onwards, around 2014 or was it 2015 or somewhere in that time period, I went to an autism club and they had all archive video games, and X-Men v Street Fighter was in there instantly. And I was hooked once again, and I just loved playing on it. You know, it was just like magic. And I could remember everything that I did back in '96 when I instantly knew who to play as. You had Bison and Magneto, Cyclops and Ryu, Gambit and Wolverine, um, Chun Li and Cammy. Like it was just like a very powerful nostalgia thing to play on. And again, that this is the beauty of what video games from the '90s can do to you. Now, I still wish they could have gone away when doing a comic book adaptation of this video game, and I would love to have seen like how would the alliance between Magneto and Bison would have been fleshed out, like, and they could have done like how they would meet and how they would have dominated until the very end, where they would have to fight each other, or who would turn on the other, or regardless, like it would have been like something I think would have been a tremendous storytelling. I really do believe that this would have been, you know, a thing of beauty. Seeing two villains together when taking on the good guys, which are Ryu and Cyclops. Because again, in today's time, it would still be awesome. But back in the '90s, as I said before, this was very revolutionary, and I think it was unheard of. Oh, hey, Tommy Trains. Nice to see you pop on this special edition.
Yeah, I just like woke up around 3:20.
Oh, I didn't know you woke up, mate.
Yeah, I might be going to school on the afternoon.
Okay. Sorry for the now. My jaw's killing me. But basically, I've been doing the stream solo, and everybody else has left. It's just you're the only one who's with us now. But basically, this isn't Thomas related. This is basically about video games. Me talking about my favorite two villains I've known growing up, which are Magneto from the
If it's
X-Men.
something about like superheroes,
Yeah, basically supervillains as we're talking about, but it is
damn.
related because X-Men are superheroes, like Spider-Man is as well. But basically, this is about Magneto and M Bison from Street Fighter versus the X-Men series. And this was a video game, as I said before, that was done in 1996. And if you're wondering about this, Tommy Trains, I can give you a share screen about this. And
I didn't even know like one of the superheroes would start in the 90s like that.
well, the animated series I remembered was X-Men and Spider-Man during that time period. But this is when I discovered Marvel, and I was just getting into them at the time. Street Fighter had been around long before these guys were there. But I mean, X-Men have been around since 1963 when the first comic book came out, and Magneto, who you see in the background, he's been around since the very beginning of it. But this game was so revolutionary in 1996, as I said before. This is what it is, Tommy Trains. This is basically what it is here. This is the video game that started it all off. X-Men versus Street Fighter.
Damn.
This was to me one of the best I've ever seen. Like it
I
has all
never
the
I never seen the animated series.
wow, I advise you to check it on. It's a really good one. And once you hear the theme song, it's very catchy. This is basically the icon of the game itself, and of
Do they also have a
course,
TV series?
they did Street Fighter and X-Men did have a TV series separately, but they've never had one together. But the
Oh,
X-Men had one before Street Fighter did. And if you're wondering, and this is the iconic of the two heroes from two universes meeting together, and the iconic handshake where you have Cyclops, who's the team leader of the X-Men, you know, and he's shaking hands with Ryu, who is the hero of the Capcom universe from Street Fighter. And this is during the
yeah.
1960s, I mean, during the 90s, back when Street Fighter Alpha, this is like the pre-series where Ryu is a much younger man, and here he's with Cyclops, and they've formed into one universe together, and they meet up with one another, and it's like a fantastic crossovering. And this is kind of what would happen if you were to play the video game. You can be, a single player or if you want to team up, this is what you'd get.
Damn.
Like, there's Magneto from the top. From the Fighting Generation, that's what I was going to go to. You can find any of your favorites, and like I said, this was just a brilliant video game that we've never had since. And where's the oh yeah, like there's this one here. Like this is a winning quote if you played as Ryu and
DF is
Cyclops.
asking if this is a Marvel channel or a Thomas channel.
This is basically a channel of either side. This is basically a random I do of anything. I'm more than just a Thomas fan or a Marvel fan. But like I said, this is what happens a lot of times. This is just a new stream of what to do. Like, this is like a winning quote from Cyclops when you win a match. Or here's an ending. Here's like some of the endings that you see when you win the arcade game. Like Cyclops and Ryu handshake with each other. And then, there's this one here at the end where Cyclops and the X-Men guys go together and try and do what's awesome with each other. And of course, it's a absolutely brilliant storytelling, and of course, if you win as Ryu, he sets off and finds new challenges to fight, because he's a Street Fighter warrior character. So yeah, and here's like my favorite villain. Like here's M
Oh
Bison,
yeah,
the main
I
villain, one of the
I
main
never
villains.
played that game, but I did actually seen like a parody in a live action skit on YouTube.
In any case, here's one where Bison and Magneto are together. Of course, it's just fantastic. Like my two favorite villains together, and of course, at the end of the day, when they fight each other, like when they have to at the end, like this is the one where Magneto has beaten Bison, and he takes his Grandmasters with him, and
Damn,
this one over here is the end of when Bison beats Magneto at the end. Like if it was swapped around.
damn.
Yeah, when the two villains fight. and
I thought
and
villains would like gang up together to defeat the heroes like that.
oh yeah, this is basically when you play, as I said before, when you play as these characters, you have to defeat Apocalypse, who's the X-Men bad guy in this. And once they've been beaten, once you've defeated him, your partner or yourself have to turn on each other and you fight each other, and whoever wins the storytelling. That's how it goes in the Tag Team Archive. And of course, this is also Bison with his Shadaloo loyalist, which is Kami, who he would stick with. That's basically from the same universe as he's in. So he would stick with Kami as usual. But when he came across Magneto, Bison felt like he had found someone who was very equal to him in terms of, someone who could fight for world domination. That is basically the reason why the two would, form together, and they basically dominated until right near the end. They were basically secretive to one another, and they posed a very serious threat to the other characters, which is the reason why, they all fight with each other. They all fight with the good guys. Because you gotta stop them, otherwise, if they have it their way, they're gonna dominate the earth.
Damn.
And of course, like I said, it was a shame that we never got to see a crossover in comic book with this, or even get to see like a series done of this, because this new crossover fighting game had potential to become an actual series on the screen, or because at least that's what I thought they were going to do, because that this was the 90s when creativity was breaking new grounds. And
Yeah, and in the 2000s they just kind of ruined it because
in the
new
2000s, no,
DDT.
in the early 2000s, in the early 2000s, it was kind of like an updated version of what we would see in the 90s. but we kind of like phased out nowadays. But nowadays they kind of remember where they come from, and so it's really good. Like they haven't forgotten, but it depends on your taste, anyways. But again, it's really fantastic to see how far Marvel has come since, because when Capcom and Marvel broke ways at the end in the early 2000s,
Yeah.
it was like, but they have come back recently and have done like Marvel versus Capcom 3, which was a nice rekindleship of the series. But at the same time, it wasn't quite the same, but it was nice to see that hadn't been forgotten. But I would like to have seen like a series on screen, or a comic book, or a graphic novel, or even an anime variation of this to be done. Because
Like a manga.
yeah, like a Japanese comic book of this game, because that also would have worked too as well, or even an anime series like we see today. They could still have the chance to do that, if they wanted to, because this would spark off, the Marvel and Capcom fans would love to see it. I would do anything to see it happen, because Magneto is an iconic villain in the X-Men series in Marvel, and M. Bison's been an icon since he's been around for 31 years. Same time as I have.
Yeah.
But again, to have these two together would be awesome. Like I have not seen. I mean, I've seen cosplays of the two, like via pictures, but I've come across a couple of Magneto cosplayers, but I've never seen one dressed up like in Bison. And I have actually been making attempts to get a Bison costume to fit me. All I have to do is just shave off my beard and mustache, and I'm basically Street Fighter 2 M Bison when he had black iris on him, and instead of having gashy white eyes. So I was, and I've got a friend of mine who is a big Magneto fan, who did a fantastic job on him. And I thought, like, if I could do that, then we can cosplay X-Men versus Street Fighter, the video game, come to life. And this is what I've been.
I would imagine you would make a live skit on a YouTube video.
What did you say, Tommy Trines? I couldn't make out that.
I said like pretty much if you're gonna like wear that costume, I was thinking, are you gonna make like you're gonna film a video skit on that?
That would be quite nice if somebody did do that. Like I could do like a small video if anybody was recording me or whatever, doing that, and put it on. Like you got Magneto versus M Bison at a cosplay Comic-Con event or something like that. But again, I mean, I've seen it happen before, but this is like, I don't think anybody has ever attempted to do that before with Marvel versus Capcom together in a cosplaying battle. But it would be awesome if, and I would love to make the attempt to do it, because I really dig these two characters. Yes, DF, I can understand you like Marvel too, but I love Magneto. He is just brilliant. If you dig his past up, like, if you understand why Magneto does the things that he does, is because his past revealed him to be he was basically a survivor of the Holocaust, because Magneto is in fact a German. And this is his origin story of who he was. And he vowed to wipe off humanity, and make way for mutants, because that's what he is.
He's like something out of like World War II of Adolf Hitler. Sorry for destroying it.
But basically, that's who Magneto was. He was a survivor of the Holocaust. He's a Jew, and everything else about him. But after he lost his parents in that, and of course, he lost his entire family. And of course, he was friends with Charles Xavier, and they had hidden powers because he's the power of magnetism. He can just about lift anything made out of metal. That's why he's called Magneto. And of course, he can make force fields. He is basically, that type of a guy. But he wanted to like take over the world through mutant, deliberation, and he could wipe out humanity to pave the way for the brotherhood of mutants, who hide in fear of humans who didn't understand them. again, Tommy Trains, you should check out the series and watch it for yourself, and you will understand. And you could end up becoming a big fan of this, like I did when I grew up in the 90s. Now, when it comes to Bison, who you can see on the other side, he's very different to Magneto, but his powers are very similar, except he uses like this weird psycho power, which is like an energy of blue and purple flames of electricity that comes from his body and arms, you know. And he's like a dictator who wants to take over the entire world, like any other villain would. But he's a badass villain that you just cannot hate. You just because he's got such a badass theme song, you know, he's got that awesome, haunting looking smile on his face, you know. But like I said, he's similar to Magneto in terms of world domination, but again, he's an intriguing character. Like, he was mysterious, you know, and the more you learn about him, the more you will come to either fear or like him. Like, he's definitely a badass that you would either die fighting for or you would want to serve alongside with, despite the fact he's a very evil dictator, but he's one that you cannot hate, you know.
Like he has something to go through.
Yeah,
Like you cannot understand what
he
you cannot
basically has been
understand.
he basically has been killed off several times, but he always finds a way to cheat death. Like, the body you see him there, that's his original body form when he was in his original body, and he had a deadly psycho power. In the Alpha series, he peaked in Street Fighter 3. In Street Fighter Alpha 3, Bison peaked at the height of his psycho power with his ultimate body, which was disintegrating because, you know, his soul couldn't handle it. And eventually, in Street Fighter 3, he quote unquote dies, but his soul survived and he gets a new body built for him. And he wakes up in it, but his
And
body's
he's
not
pretty
as
much a
strong as it.
god.
Yeah, basically, he cheats death. His psycho power can actually weaponize his soul. And
Whoa.
so basically, he cannot die. He basically transfers his soul to a new body built for him to maintain his power. But in Street Fighter 2, hang on a minute, I'm just going to show you here. If I get my screen cap back up again.
Alright.
Like,
I
I'm
just
really
want to
enjoying.
sell something.
What would that be?
I want to share a screen. You're talking about like Street Fighter, right?
Yeah, Street Fighter the series. Yeah, they've been around since 1987.
Are you seeing my screen?
Yeah.
Alright.
We don't want to.
I have to warn you. This could be disturbing since you're talking about Street Fighter.
This is
will be
it.
warned.
That's it. You can send me the link to this afterwards. But I actually have seen this movie.
Actually,
We don't want
this is
issues, mate. So can you cut this down for a second? Copy the sound off. This is basically, I have this live action Street Fighter movie as well because, you know, it's a fantastic movie. The first live animation based on the pre-alpha series. So yeah, they're breaking new grounds, mate. That is true. Yeah, in X-Men. Oh god, X-Men 3 didn't happen, pal. Yeah, you know, if you watch X-Men Days of Future Past, Wolverine fixed the past, and X-Men 3 was annihilated. Okay. If you want to join in the phrase with this, mate, DF, you are more than happy to. I'm very interested to hear what you like to remember about this. So if you want to, the link is in the description here for you. If you want to.
Speaking of X-Men, the recent movie, I can't remember if it was from 2019.
Oh, that was not a good. That was not a good one. That was not one of the best.
Me and my mom and her friends, we did watch it. Like, it looks good.
Basically, it's called the Dark Phoenix one. Yeah,
that one.
That oh man, I kind of I was like, on paper it looked good, but it just, oh my goodness, it kind of reminded me so much of what happened in Wolverine Origins, which was absolutely messed up. Like, everything went wrong with that movie.
Yeah. Like, pretty much it was that the girl character. Like she became the
When he
villain. Like
turned
that.
into the Dark Phoenix, that was Jean Grey.
Oh yeah, that one. And apparently the
Okay,
villain.
she was a good guy, but turned into a split personality. But
Yeah.
basically, here we go. Look, here's M. Bison as he is in X-Men v Street Fighter, but this is basically his original body form. That's his original look.
Oh okay.
And that there, when you fight or play as Bison, that's him in the video game when you play as him in the arcade, when he fought with his cape on. Where I'm more as used to villains
I mean, he
fighting without
seems
them.
to have the exact same cape, except the colors just. I think
This
One
is
Piece like knees, they're kind of like brownish on the other
listen.
one.
That's basically because that's the video game of what it looks like. In the art paint, in the artworking, it's very different. But basically, I'm more used to villains when they take their capes off and fighting, except for others, depending on what it is. But anyways, that's Bison in the actual Alpha series when he has a serious look on his face. Whereas in X-Men v Street Fighter, he's kind of got the same fighting stance, but he's actually smiling with his teeth. Apparently, he's
Was
basically smiling with his teeth. Whereas in the Alpha one, he has like a serious stare on his face. That's basically Bison's winning form when he's in victory, when he wins. And that there is his versus stage when you are prepared to fight.
what kind of powers does he have?
He basically has the power of psycho power. He possesses blue and purple flames of electricity that calls through his body. That's what weaponizes his soul.
Oh,
Um, hang on. Let me just show you at the end. After Bison lost his body in Street Fighter Alpha 3, he lost his powers. He had a new body forged for him, and this is like, after that he ends up forming a new body, and this is basically what his body would look like. This is in Street Fighter 2 when we all first were introduced to him in '91. His body was a lot more slimmer, and he fought without his cape on. This is
hmm.
basically what Bison looked like throughout the '90s, like in the Street Fighter 2 series, basically, where he looked a lot older. His powers were much weaker, but his Psycho Crusher, his special move, still delivered a deadly punch. So you could not underestimate him. And eventually, over time, his body got reinvented again because there was another crossover game called Capcom versus SNK. And Bison went to transformation and he looked a lot more better in this form. Like, that's him right there.
Hmm.
That's him doing his fighting pose, which I used to copy a lot growing up. Uh,
No.
he's basically fighting in the style of Muay Thai fighting because he fought in the martial arts in Thailand, which is where you
Oh.
fight him in. But he's Japanese, but this was his Muay Thai fighting style. So he studied a lot of martial arting. Basically, as you can tell here, this is what Bison looks like in Capcom versus SNK. His body's slim, but he looks a lot more better, and I kind of prefer him in that form because he looks pretty good. But still, you know, that's how he was in another cross. Okay, this version of Bison, as I showed you before, that's him in X-Men versus Street Fighter when he's got, you can actually see he's smiling, whereas in the other one he had a
It's
very
like too small. I can't even see.
there. Um, all right. Let me just make this even bigger. There.
Uh,
Can you see now?
Oh.
There.
Okay.
You can see he's actually smiling.
Hmm.
That was basically his X-Men versus Street Fighter fighting when he, entered the Marvel universe.
Oh.
So, anyways, after that, Bison's undergone many transformations. He's been killed off many times. And in 2009, he returned in Street Fighter 4 with a new body formation. And in Street Fighter 5, he's peaked again. And it seems like he's dead, but he's actually a phantom now. Like, his soul survives, but he's, like, lurking around. Which is a real shame, really, because I was hoping he would come back. Who knows? But going back to the Marvel versus Street Fighter thing, this was very, very revolutionary. Like like I said before, this was a really, really good crossover game, and they even did limited action figures of the game, which of course again was very, very new back then. As you can see clearly, there's M Bison with his cape, which is removable, and of course there's Cyclops, and again they are basically battling each other. You got like the good guy from X-Men taking on the villain of Street Fighter, and like if you want to know about the X-Men as well, like oh boy, this is going to be so cool. Like check this out. You've got Wolverine, who was played by this is Wolverine as we would know him in the yellow and black and blue, or even in his tan one. Whereas we're all familiar with Hugh Jackman playing him, but this is Wolverine as we all knew him as. And there's him taking on Akuma, because in the storytelling, Akuma claims he knows something about Wolverine's past. It's quite a bizarre story, but it's again a badass, thing to see. And then of course, where's Magneto? Oh, I can't see where's Magneto. Oh, there he is. And there's Magneto taking on Ryu, the bad guy of X-Men taking on the hero of Ryu, So I thought like this would be, a cool crossover when you have two of the best taking on each other. And again, this would have, if I can just get my hands on these figures, if I could, this would be like, an awesome.
How much do they cost? Like when you go online shopping?
Oh, they're very dear now. They're basically like rare gems now. They're like very rare to get. And I'm not gonna lie to you, I did not even know they existed back then. Because when I went to toy stores back in the day, I did not recall seeing any of these in any of the stores I went to. Like, not even once. Even when online was becoming a thing, I still haven't seen, So again, this was just gobsmacking amazing. Like, here's like a clip of Magneto and Bison like in an ordinary game fighting each other, where Magneto's using his magnetic powers, using a some sort of magnetic tempest thing where he's using on Bison. So this is kind of like what it's like when you play in the game. And here's Magneto again taking on Cyclops, using another finishing maneuver that he's using on him. So this is what it's like when you play on it. Like if you ever get the opportunity, you should give it a try, Tommy Shrines. Here's another one here where it shows Magneto and Bison together actually performing a double team maneuver, where Bison's doing his scissor kick nightmare combination and Magneto's doing his magnetic shockwave finisher. So this is like to double the impact up. Like it's really good. And that's one of the winning quotes that Magneto would say, or whoever wins it gets to say the quote of the two of them. So yeah, They're very cool. I've actually remembered at one point someone did a fan art of Magneto and Bison together where they actually had like a handshake. And I thought that was just very iconic. Like the deadliest alliance I've ever seen. I'm just going to type this in here. Ah, there it is. Oh wow, it looks like I've missed out a few others. There's been other fans who have put Bison and Magneto together. Oh, I guess there are some fans who still haven't forgotten when the two forces basically became one at one point. Where is he now? This is actually fantastic. I've never seen anything like this.
Wait, where's I read?
Like I've only seen one art painting, but it seems like other fans have decided to do the exact same thing,
Yeah.
which is even better. I guess somebody actually has actually made the attempt of actually doing a fan comic book of doing the X-Men versus Street Fighter. Wow, this is this is revolutionary. I'm not the only one who thought the same here. It says one guy says it's nice to see an idea. It was a crying shame that neither Capcom and Marvel, had ever made a movie about these two together. Like, and I think they should. There is an opportunity for them to do this, and if so, just imagine the amount of geeking the fans would have. What's your opinion? Tell me, Trains. Would you like to give me your
I
opinion?
I haven't seen any of those, but considering it would be interesting, like that.
Oh wow, there's another one here where the two of them are together.
Mm.
The Master of Psycho Power and the Master of Magnetism. Like here's one here for you. Like in the chat. Like here's one of them together.
Well, I'm checking it.
That's Bison and Magneto if they were staying together.
Damn.
But here it is. The epic, basically, in my opinion, the best villain handshake of all time. Even though I've done it with Darth Vader right at one point.
Mm.
But yeah, here it is. The iconic handshake of the two together. Where you can see the Master of Magnetism and his Psycho Power combined as one.
Damn.
And that's what makes these two, great. But yeah. Oh yeah, this guy he did an art painting of these two because, as I said before, when Marvel and versus Capcom 3 came out, many guys were expecting Bison to come back. Magneto did return.
Wait a minute. Capcom is famous for the original IP such as Mega Man and Evil. They were also one of the top developers licensing games like DuckTales and Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. Capcom and Marvel arcade collaborations were among their famous starting.
Not really, but yeah. But when Capcom decided to bring Magneto back into the game, they did. Problem is, though, they didn't bring M. Bison back to the roster. Even though they did tease a return for him, but they didn't. It was really, really disappointing. I mean, they literally could have had an opportunity to reunite the two of them, like reform the alliance that they had, or they could have continued on battling with each other. But I really do feel like they could have got back together and just continued to be the two badass villains that would give the heroes a run for their money, to make the battle scenes even awesome, which would have been epic. It's just a real crying shame we never got the chance to see that again. It really was. So, anyways, hey, do you want to give me your other thoughts about this maybe before I wrap this one up?
I mean, that's kind of awesome, that especially with the whole superhero things. Since I was never into those, like that looks kind of awesome. But back in the '90s, that is like, damn.
Yeah, it was. The 90s was, well, I mean, there were a lot of ups and downs, but when it comes to
Yeah,
this type of thing, let's just say it was a hell of a roller coaster ride.
mhm.
You know, something that had, I think it was done before, but this basically had, a massive impact on both X-Men fans and Street Fighter fans. It was one of those things that, wish could happen to this day. I mean, it can still happen, but damn, it was just, yeah, basically a fantastic thing that, revolutionized, a whole lot of things. Huh. Wow, it does seem like, well, I have seen a couple of fanfics about X-Men versus Street Fighter with Bison, who was at one point on his own, I think before he aligns himself with Magneto. And then there's one guy who's done this on DA, which is called X-Men v Street Fighter: A Battle of Dreams or Nightmares, which kind of does make a lot of sense. Um, but still, it was a real crying shame that we never got to see it on screen, you know. But they could still go. I mean, they could still do like a Japanese manga of this if they
Mhm.
wanted to. Um, or they could do a TV series as well. I mean, seriously, we have. I mean, in this day and age, to help us with the time change that we're facing, it would be something cool. Like, you know, it's the same thing with what the Thomas community is going through. I mean, I know, yeah, they've gone through a lot of shenanigans lately, but it
Mhm.
does seem like we are getting back somewhere to a better thing because I have seen a lot of drama have dropped a little bit, but it does seem
Mhm.
like the fandom has kind of found its track, so to speak.
Yeah.
Anyways, Tommy Trains, what have you got planned for the rest of 2022?
I have no idea. Since I'm in grade 12, most likely, I pretty much might be going to college. But considering I'm just finished being a lazy ass, I ain't got nothing else.
I
So
don't
that's
think
where
you
my
know.
mind
Don't say
stands.
that, Tommy Trains. You're not a lazy ass. You just haven't got anything to do at the moment.
Yeah. Well, I do have assignments,
Unless
but I'm
you,
pretty much like procrastinating.
unless you have another idea to do something for your model train stuff, like you did, regarding your uploads on the DA thing, which is really nice.
Yeah.
Um, but either ways, like I said, this has been an intriguing one. I might do another sequel to this, perhaps, when it comes to talking about Marvel and Capcom and maybe DC and whatever it was. But yeah, this was something I really wanted to get onto, and who knows what will happen afterwards. But thanks
Mm.
for popping on, Tommy Trains, and I'll catch
Yeah.
you another time. So,
Yeah.
so for any of you guys who will be scratching us right now, thank you very much for tuning in for this streaming that I wanted to do for a while. But again, take care of yourselves, and hopefully we'll see you another time. This is GameFan701. This has been the Magneto and M Bison X-Men versus Street Fighter stream. I could do a sequel to this maybe to continue on, but we'll have to wait until another time. So until then, take care of yourselves, guys, and good night.